So far this spring, Mets starting pitchers have been throwing the ball really well. Can they keep up this success in the regular season? I'll break it all down on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets. Your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. It was a great weekend for the Mets starting pitchers as we first saw Luis Severino throw the ball really well on Friday night. Broke that down on a special Saturday show of Locked On Mets. But then on Saturday, we saw another good start by a Met. Sean Manaea pitched 4 scoreless in his first hairless start. He said after the game that he felt a lot lighter out there. Hair wasn't getting in his face. It was a lot cooler. I imagine it is a lot easier to pitch when you don't have all that mop behind you every time you throw. And it looked really good for Manaea. He allowed 2 hits. He did walk 3, but he struck out 5. Again, 4 scoreless for him. Got up to 61 pitches, 35 of which were strikes. On Sunday, Adrian Hauser took the ball. He had a perfect day at the office. 10 up, 10 down, 5 strikeouts, which you don't see a lot of when it comes to Hauser racking up punch-outs. So far this spring, if you look at the Mets' viable starting rotation right now, what they're expected to have come opening day, you have Tyler McGill leading the pack, a 1.13 ERA in 3 outings. Luis Severino, only 2 outings, but he has yet to allow a run. You have Adrian Hauser, a 3.86 ERA, 2 really good outings, 1 mediocre one. Sean Manaea allowed 3 earned runs in his first start, but then just settled in his second time around. And same went with Jose Quintana. Rougher first start, second start much better. Let's look at the last turn through this spring rotation. So you had Tyler McGill, 3 scoreless. Jose Quintana, 3 scoreless. Luis Severino, 3 scoreless. Sean Manaea, 4 scoreless. And then Adrian Hauser today, 3 1/3 scoreless. That's not going to always happen. It is spring training. I get it. Let's not get too carried away. But at the same time, the Mets ERA as a team right now is 2.64, which is about a run better than any team in Major League Baseball. And that could just be coincidence. That could be good luck, whatever you want to call it. It's better than all these guys getting blown up every single time they take the ball. It's better than the Mets having a 4.85 ERA. And even on top of the starting pitchers, Jose Budo has allowed just 1 run in 6 innings. So they're a 6th starter right now. He's throwing the ball well. And all these guys are healthy and they're on track. This is a really good sign for the New York Mets because this starting rotation is one that you look at on paper and it leaves a lot to be desired. I know it's just baseball. Recently, we were going through and ranking our top starting rotations in the game. Last year, the Mets were somewhere in the top 5, I believe, because, of course, you had Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, and Kodai Senga in your opening day rotation. We were doing these rankings heading into the season. And Jose Quintana as well. David Peterson coming off a good season. Things looked amazing on paper. Didn't work out. So on paper doesn't always mean everything. But I'll tell you, the Mets on paper compared to some other rotations in baseball, it doesn't look good. The Braves, they got Spencer Strider, Max Fried, Chris Sale, Charlie Morton. So a really good top 4. The Phillies, you got Wheeler, Nola, Ranger, Suarez. That's a great top 3. The Marlins always have really good starting pitching. Obviously, they don't have Sandy Alcantara right now, but they still have Yuri Perez and Jesus Luzardo. Those are really good pitchers that right now you would take over anyone that the Mets have in their opening day rotation without Kodai Senga. With all of that said, though, if these guys can just be dependable, it's going to go a long way. And I mean, I've talked about it at length in the past. And I don't know if it's really translating much this spring. I couldn't tell you if the defense is the reason when there's so many guys cycling in and out. But the Mets are running out a lot of their starters early in games. And whether it's the infield behind these guys or, again, just good spring fortune, I do believe that as we head into the season, if this starting rotation can do two things, I think the Mets are going to be okay. Actually, three things. One, take the ball. That's obvious, right? Having these guys healthy is important. Two, keep the ball in the yard. That's a huge one, especially when you have the outfield defense the Mets should have day in and day out, because if balls are being hit in the air, but they're staying in the yard, the Mets are going to have a good chance to catch a lot of them. And then the third one is just not walking too many. If they can do those things, I do think there is a pathway to a solid starting rotation. If Luis Severino can be 80% of what he once was, that's a quality starting pitcher. He might not be an ace, but could he be a solid number 3 this year? Could he pitch, into somewhere in the mid threes when it comes to his ERA? I think he could. Could Jose Quintana do what he did last year, but over a full season, which was 3.57 ERA? I think he absolutely can do that. Is Tyler McGill's little breakout real? I did a whole show on it. I believe that he does have a really good chance of being a quality starter. Everyone's raving about Adrian Hauser just being a solid pitcher, a guy that can mix his looks, can cut the ball different ways, can trust his sinker. He's got his slider, just can manipulate the different parts of the zone and hopefully keep the ball in the yard and get outs on the ground. Really, is the big thing. And then Sean Manaea is another guy that has a lot of upside. So I look at this rotation, and yeah, it's not one that you're saying, imagine they get into a playoff situation. Woo! Severino, Quintana, obviously Senga hopefully be back by then, but that's not necessarily what we're looking at. But can this rotation be good enough with a quality bullpen behind them and hopefully enough runs being produced by the offense? I think so. And the funny thing is, this spring, it's the offense that has actually struggled more than the pitchers. And I actually think, shockingly enough, right now, as we're talking, a couple weeks from opening day on March 11th, if you ask me what I'm more concerned about, the starting rotation come opening day or the Mets getting production from their DH spot, I'm having a conversation a little more than I thought I would. If you ask me right now, would the Mets be better served to sign Jordan Montgomery to a 7-year deal or JD Martinez to a 1-year deal? While in the past, I would have said, get the quality starting pitcher. Right now, I'm wondering, is that the biggest need this team has? It's just interesting how these stories can change as you get through spring. And obviously, it's just spring. But what we're going to discuss in the next segment is how sometimes spring results can actually tell us a little bit about the regular season. So I want to go through that in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. You can also bet on MLB futures right now. So if you want to bet on the Mets to make the playoffs or for them to hit the over on their win total, which is set at 81.5, maybe you want to bet on Pete Alonso and him to win the MVP. The last time I checked, the odds was it plus 2,500, I believe, on Pete, and plus 3,000 on Francisco Lindor. Regardless, you can find it all there at FanDuel. And then remember, before you place any MLB futures bets, place that $5 bet on something going on tonight. And if you win that bet, whether it's an NBA game, a player, whatever it is that you bet on, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Anyone who's been listening to the show lately has probably heard me talk about our Locked On Mets Insiders program. This is our texting service where I send updates and anytime something breaks on the Mets. It's also where you can ask me questions. I got a question from Scott that I want to share because it leads perfectly into the show today. Also, I want to give a special shout out to Scott's daughters, Farah and Bianca. But Scott, he had multiple texts that he sent me, and it's pretty funny, his sort of stream of consciousness. The first text was, "This is a good spring." Then he says, "This isn't going to be good, ... We never carry it over." Then he says, "That'd be a good show topic for you. when have we ever had a good spring bleed into this season? So that brings me to looking at past springs and if it ever translates. And before we get into those numbers, I will say if you want to be a Locked On Mets insider to ask me questions like this, to maybe hear your name featured on the show, just find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. So I did some digging for Scott here, right? I looked through and tried to find the last time the Mets even had a winning record in spring training, and it's been a while. So yeah, 2023. They were supposed to be good, right? All the hype leading into spring training with the Verlander signing, all that. Well, last spring, the Mets were 10-14. 2022 was a lockout shortened one. They were 7-7. 2021, they were 11-11. 2020, again, shortened because of COVID, 8-11. 2019, they were 13-16. 2018, they were 10-18. 2017, they were 15-17. 2016, a playoff team eventually, they were 8-17. If you do remember, that 2016 Mets team sort of came alive in the second half, but they started off awful coming off the World Series appearance, which leads me to the last time the New York Mets have had a successful spring training. It's also the last time that MLB.com has recorded the spring training standings that I could go back to. 2015, the New York Mets were 19-12 in spring training. Of course, they won the NL East, and they eventually went to the World Series. They had the best record among teams in the Grapefruit League. So then I went back through it the other way, right? Who had the best record in 2016? The Washington Nationals. They went 19-14. They went on to go 95-67 in the season. They won the NL East. 2017, New York Yankees had the best record in the Grapefruit League. They went on to make the playoffs. 2018, the Red Sox had the best record in the Grapefruit League. They won the World Series. 2019, there were three teams separated by a game. You had the Yankees, the Astros, and the Nationals. We're all separated right atop the Grapefruit League standings. Spring training doesn't matter, right? The Astros and the Yankees met in the ALCS. Astros beat the Yankees. They then met the Nationals in the World Series, and the Nationals, of course, beat the Astros. 2020, COVID year, really strange. Phillies and Blue Jays were the top two teams. I believe the Blue Jays made the playoffs. Doesn't really matter. 2021, the Marlins, Blue Jays, and Red Sox were the top three teams. Marlins obviously did nothing. Blue Jays, Red Sox, they made the playoffs. 2022, again, lockout shortened, so most teams were very close to each other. The Cardinals were number one, and they did win the Central. And then last year, again, the Cardinals had the best spring. Did not work out for them. But then behind them, you had the Braves, Astros, and Orioles. All three teams had outstanding regular seasons. Spring training does not matter. I'll stand by that. You can't take too much from anyone's individual performance or a team's performance. But what I will say is being atop the spring training standings is a lot better than being at the bottom. And that's further proven as I dug into that information. So 2015, who finished last in the Grapefruit League? The Detroit Tigers. In the season, they also finished last. The Braves in 2016 finished last in spring training. That never would affect the Braves, would it? Actually, that was one of the few years where the Braves weren't good. They finished last in the NL East. 2017, again, the Braves, awful in spring, carried over into the season. They were 72-90. Does anybody remember the Braves being bad? Because it's hard for me to even fathom that. Although I guess if I dig deep enough in my brain, I do remember those years were more, Mets going up for the Nationals atop the division than the Braves. 2018, who was the worst team in the Grapefruit League? None other than the New York Mets. They went 77-85 during the regular season, and that was with Jacob deGrom being historically great and only winning, 10 games? Yeah. Cy Young, awful team. 2019, Red Sox and Orioles were the worst teams in the Grapefruit League. Red Sox went on to win 84 games. Orioles were 54-108. 2021, the Astros. They went to the World Series, so didn't really phase them. 2022, the Nationals, they lost 107 games. Then last year, the three worst teams were Marlins, Pirates, Mets. Marlins made the playoffs. Pirates and Mets did not. Again, it's not an end-all, be-all. I'm not saying, hey, if you win the Grapefruit League, look out, the Mets are going to go and make a run in the World Series. I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination. What I will say is it is definitely a lot better to show up and have a good spring than to have an awful spring. And awful springs sometimes are precursors to awful seasons. just like sometimes a great spring is a precursor to a great season. A lot of times it can go either way. Most teams that end up being good are probably somewhere in the middle in spring, because I think a lot of teams end up somewhere in the middle. But spring training does mean a little bit of something. These are, in a lot of cases, the same rosters, right? For the most part, these guys eventually are getting more and more playing time in these games. It's going to carry over to some respects. To see Francisco Alvarez have a little mini breakout in spring training, you can say it's nothing, or you can say it's a player that really worked hard in his game this offseason and is showing up ready to go. Pete Alonso having a great spring training right now. You can say it's nothing, or you got Pete, who's in a contract year, who probably was more motivated this offseason than he's maybe ever been in the past. It's a huge season for Pete. Then you could look at someone like Francisco Lindor, said the other day, hadn't hit a home run yet. Of course, after I say that reverse jinx, he hits one. It might not mean anything. So I don't want to put too much stock in spring. That's not what I'm trying to say here. But it is important to note that in the past, sometimes spring success has carried over. And so when you see the Mets and their pitching be better than any team in baseball right now, that's a good sign. It's definitely not a bad thing. I don't think that, going back to the initial text from Scott, where he said, ooh, they look good. Ooh, that's bad. It's going to carry over. And it's going to carry, or it's not going to carry over. It's going to be sort of like the Mets are wasting all their good bullets and the season starts going to be awful. I don't think that actually is accurate. I think if the team is playing well, that's always a good thing, regardless of when it happens. You want it to carry over and you want the good baseball to come, obviously in April and May, a little more than in March. But playing good baseball in March is better than playing bad baseball in March. And I think that's kind of the most important takeaway I have from that whole exercise that I did. Regardless, big shout out again to Scott and his daughters. Appreciate you for asking the question. And for all of you who are communicating with me over on Subtext, the Locked On Mets Insiders, been really fun to get to know some of you guys. And I appreciate all of you who have subscribed, who have asked me questions, and it helps me produce the show. So thank you all. To close out things in the final segment here, what I want to do is go over some other notes from the weekend, of course, in camp. Got updates on Edwin Diaz, Jeff McNeil when it comes to rehabbing or coming back off injuries, and also just other guys that perform well, either offensively or pitching. We'll get to all that in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs as well as their Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV. It provides access to millions of movies, TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. And the best part to me about my Fire TV stick, I can unplug it and take it with me. So in my living room, it works great. And then I could take my living room viewing experience with me on the road, plug it into that TV in the hotel room. It works great. And Fire TV also recently created the Fire TV channels, which deliver a consistent supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, whether that's March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more, not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. Other news and notes from the weekend: Edwin Diaz will make his return on Monday to an MLB game, albeit an exhibition one in the Grapefruit League. It'll be great to hear Narcos blare in front of how many fans can they pack into that stadium? The 6,000 fans? I don't even know. But it'll be good to see him get back on the mound, face some MLB hitters. That shows that he is full bore, ready to go, and he's going to be a huge part of the Mets this season. So awesome news on Diaz. Jeff McNeil started swinging, dry swinging off the tee. So he's getting there. Seems like he's still at least a week out from coming into actual games. But the good thing is, once he is sort of cleared and that arm is all 100% ready to go, ready to swing against live pitchers and everything, he can obviously get in those Grapefruit League games, and that'll be nice for him. But more importantly, he can go on the backfields and just rack up at bats. I know Ian Happ has a podcast, and he's dealing with a hamstring injury for the Cubs right now. he was talking about on his podcast that I was listening to. Zach Short, by the way, another host of that show, interestingly enough. Zach Short, of course, in Mets camp on the 40-man roster right now. But he was talking about how the good thing about being a big leaguer and having an injury happen in spring is you can really get a lot of work in on those backfields where he can take an at bat at the beginning of each inning and even like cycle between different games that are going on back there and get reps really quickly. So I wouldn't be too concerned about Jeff McNeil. As long as we don't hear about a setback, I think he's going to be good to go for opening day. And Joey Wendell's been playing too. So right now, there's not really a lot when it comes to major injuries to worry about for the big league roster. Kodai Senga is obviously the exception, the one that we've known about for a while. And Carlos Mendoza says everything is going well with Senga. So positive developments pretty much across the board when it comes to Mets injuries. Now, Nate Lavender made it into another game, even though he's been reassigned to minor league camp. And he looked awesome again. He struck out the side against the Cardinals on Saturday, including strikeouts of Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. So what is that? I think it's 7 Ks, 3 perfect innings, something like that now. He's made a name for himself, and we're going to see Nate Lavender at some point this season. It's not going to be the first month, or likely. Might come a little bit later than that. The Mets have a lot of names to sort through. That's why they assigned him to the minor league camp. But if he keeps pitching like this, if he's in Syracuse and he's sporting a 1.02 ERA with 20 strikeouts and 11 innings pitched, and he's just carving people up, at some point, the Mets got to take notice. Sean Reed-Foley, who is potentially in line to make this big league team, he had another solid inning on Saturday, a 1-2-3 inning. Also got 1 strikeout, not 3, like Lavender. Sunday, Austin Adams relieved Adrian Hauser in the 4th inning. Gave up a hit, but got 2 outs via strikeouts to get out of that inning. So Adams continues his spotless record when it comes to his ERA this spring. Adam Ottavino and Jake Diekman both pitched scoreless innings on Sunday. Jorge Lopez has not looked great, gave up 3 hits and a run. He's going to make this team. He's got the MLB contract, but so far not very good on him. And Shintaro Fujinami had a rough one too. Gave up 3 hits, walked 1, allowed 2 runs, only 1 of which was earned. But the way Fuji pitched in this one, he's got a couple more chances. I really think there's a strong possibility he's starting the year in Syracuse. Nothing against him. I just think the fact that the Mets have that option that they can use, they have someone like Sean Reed-Foley and another guy like Yohan Ramirez who are throwing the ball really well, Austin Adams as well. I just think that there's other guys who are throwing a little bit better right now who are maybe more in the fold, and Fuji got a late start to camp, and he's got a lot he can work on. So he's got all the upside. We're going to see a lot of Fuji this year. It just might not be on opening day. I'm not trying to overreact to a single outing, but he's got to really ramp up quick here and show that he can throw strikes in the zone and be effective in the zone. So we'll see. Not the best outing, but also not one to completely overreact to. On the hitting front, Francisco Lindor, like I mentioned, he homered on Saturday against Steven Matz. Matz got knocked around in that game. He had Mark Vientos and G-Man Choi each hit back-to-back doubles in that first inning. Brett Beatty drove in Choi with a little bit of a bloop hit. So that's how the Mets put up a 3-spot. Choi had a huge game, 3 for 3 with a walk. So good to see a DH candidate actually hitting. Vientos and Beatty both went 2 for 4. And then on Sunday, Mark Vientos homered, second of the spring, opposite field shot against a left-handed pitcher. His OPS is now over 700. So he's starting to show some signs, which is good to see. I mean, the DH job, unless the Mets sign somebody, is pretty much his. I don't think that even if G-Man Choi beat out DJ Stewart, that's not going to really impact Mark Vientos' playing time, I don't think. Choi would make sense to make this roster as an experienced guy who could back up Pete Alonso at first base. Not that Vientos can't do that, but Vientos has been playing a lot of third this spring, and I could see a scenario where maybe the Mets said, you know what, you got Vientos and Beatty sort of platooning at third. Vientos starting against all left-handed pitching at third base. And then also obviously getting DH at bats. Choi can back up Pete at first. If the Mets have a blowout, Choi can go out there, play some first base at the end of a game. And if you want to DH Pete, Choi can be in the lineup as well. He also is an experienced hitter with a lot of MLB time. Not that anyone is great with not playing, but you'd prefer probably someone with the MLB experience to be in sort of a limited role off the bench, left-handed bat. He is outperforming DJ Stewart, but that's not saying much. DJ Stewart did go 1 for 3 on Sunday. Going back to Saturday's game, Harrison Bader, he played 5 innings in the field, did not get a hit yet, 0 for 3 so far. 0 for 3, on Saturday. I'm not sure how many at-bats he's gotten. Don't think he's quite at 10 yet, but hasn't done great. Pete Alonso had a double on Sunday. I mentioned Vientos' home run. Brett Beatty went 0 for 2. So that sort of wraps up our notes on the hitters and some of the bullpen guys. We'll see how all of these different battles continue to take their form throughout this next week of play. I'll be breaking down all of the action on tomorrow's show, whatever ends up going down. Of course, Edwin Diaz's return is going to be the big story for tomorrow. But other stuff will come up, and we'll be sure to cover it all. If you're listening on the audio side, make sure you follow, rate, and review so you don't miss any episodes. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Our next big goal is to get to 9,000 subs. It'd be great to get there by the end of April, trying to be realistic. So I appreciate all of you, though, who do hit that subscribe button. Also for getting to our goal of 8,000 subs by opening day way early. Really awesome that we got that support. So I appreciate you all. If you want to follow me on socials, you can do so at Finkelstein Ryan on X. You can follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to the first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that covers everything in the world of sports. Of course, I'm talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local experts from each team, our league-wide experts from each league. You find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.